We're going to go over the two parts of the notes that we haven't covered yet. So let me always start with sharing the work outline with you guys just to make sure we're all on the same page still. All right, so and again, at any time, just unmute yourself if you got a question, just so I can answer you guys as quick as I can. Don't feel rude interrupting me. It's the easiest way to get my attention. So we are through parts A, B, and C on the notes. Today we're going to cover types of economic systems in the American mixed market economy. I'll go over those, kind of go through the slides. Like I said, I'm not going to read every slide, but I'll kind of hit some of the main key points. Probably a little more today than yesterday, but I'll still get you guys out of here about the same amount of time. And then after that point, you should have all the information between going through the PowerPoints on your own and the stuff I've gone through with you guys. You should have no problem having those assignments done, okay? And if you did not, I saw a few people already completed the current events worksheet. That's fine. I think if hopefully you use some of the information from today's two PowerPoints I'm going to go over, because probably find a little more, maybe a little easier finding some examples of current events that are involving some of those economic concepts. But that could be anything from the stuff we already covered. So if you find a news story about how toilet paper for a while there was not on the shelves, all right, there's your perfect example of scarcity. So on that worksheet, you just have to put down the news source where you found the news story from or the current event from, and what this basic economic concept is. So you write the word scarcity, and then give me a quick little summary about what the news article was about, why there was a toilet paper shortage at the beginning of the COVID issue. Okay, so just kind of, that's all I want you to kind of do with those assignments, is try to connect, or that particular assignment is connect some of those basic economic concepts to reality. Okay, and that maybe that kind of makes sense, that example I just gave you. Okay, the other two assignments here are reading guides. This should be no problem. Those are just like basic reading assignments. You got a PDF textbook reading, and then some questions to answer. So I had probably about a little more than half. I just checked this morning, a little more than half you guys have turned those in. And then the other two are those intro assignments. So I posted the numbers for how much our time's changing, so you can fill in that the numbers on that table or whatever you want to call it, and then come up with your reasons why those numbers went up or down over the last 15 to 20 years. Okay, so and then the last thing is your Unit 1 summative. Remember, guys, all your grades for you, or all your assignments for Unit 1 are due by Friday at midnight. And just make it for full points. After that, I'll be taking late points off. So if they're 30-point assignments, the highest you'll be able to get is a 20 out of 30 after Friday at midnight. Okay, same thing with the summative assessment. Get that done before Friday at midnight as well. I do have that set up. All right, so it's to your advantage. I mean, you guys are at home doing this, so it's kind of hard for me to, say you can't use your notes or you can't do that, because you're going to have your phones in front of you and stuff anyway. So I just made the link so you can take the test, you can go back and make some corrections and resubmit it. Okay, so because you're going to have your notes in front of you anyways. If you get one wrong, I'd rather you go learn what the correct answer is by going back to your notes, or even researching it in a different way on your own to get the correct answer, and then submit whatever the last assessment you submit is the one I'll put in as a grade. Okay, if that makes sense. All right, so that is where we're at. Unit 2 stuff is all, I'm going to keep reinforcing this, guys. Unit 2 is all going to be summative. All right, so all these assignments are going to be part of that 60% summative of your grade. So Unit 2 is where you're going to kind of make or break your final grade. So I will start posting those assignments this weekend. So if anyone wants to get a jump start on looking at some of the screencasts and the PowerPoints and doing those assignments, you're more welcome to it. And then next week I will post kind of like we did this week, but it'll be broken down into two groups. So like Monday, let's say, I don't know exactly which ones I'll cover, but I'll cover, let's say, taxes, budget, and crediting, or credit. And then on Wednesday or Tuesday, I'll cover the same stuff. And then Wednesday, Thursday will be the same information. So you'll have to join 2 Zooms next week, either Monday or Tuesday, and then either Wednesday or Thursday. So kind of think ahead to your work schedules, and kind of make room for that. Okay. Quick throw, unmute yourself if you got a question before I start going over the notes on that information. And if you're going to the grade book, guys, something screwed up. It's just kind of bear with us. We're in a new grade book. So actually, on your end, are you seeing grades or no? The ones I've been putting in? Either give me a thumbs up or someone unmute yourself if you've gone to the new grade book and looked. No? Okay. So I'm putting grades in, but on my end, it's not showing a final percent tally right now. So we were having that issue with government too the first week. So hopefully by tomorrow that will be that issue will be fixed. I know it's kind of a we're playing with the new grade book and we're still figuring out the system and making sure it's all working. So if you do have any questions about your grade after you've turned stuff in, just feel free to email me at any time. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and get started here so I can get you guys rolling, and another nice hot day today to go and enjoy the heat maybe. All right, so types of economic systems. I'm not going to I'm trying to spend the least amount of time here because I'd rather focus on the other PowerPoint with the US system, okay? But basically what I want you guys to understand is that from our basic economic concepts notes the other day, an economic system is something that's developed or organized. It's a structure that's going to be put together to answer those three basic economic questions, okay? And those three basic economic questions are what to produce, how to produce it, and who's going to get it. All right, so these economic systems develop around the world, whether it's the US economic system versus China's economic system versus Brazil's, Mexico's, you got European systems. So every system's slightly different, okay? Let's see if this will work. So one of the things you might want to think about is an economic system. Think of it as like a spectrum, okay? This might be kind of sloppy. Kind of like a political spectrum if you did the government. You had liberal versus conservative. All right, so at one end of the spectrum, you have, let's say, no government involvement in the economy. And at the other end of the spectrum, you have complete government control of the economy, okay? So when I say no government involvement, we're saying it's just completely a complete free market, all right? The people can do whatever they want. You can buy, sell whatever you want, however you want to buy and sell it. There's no rules, no guidelines, okay? Complete government control is there's no private property. You don't own anything. Everything's given to you by the government, okay? So if you look at the middle, this is where we're going to focus today, looking at where these types of economic systems fall, okay? So somewhere over here would be more what we're going to call our market. And then over here is going to be what we're going to call our command economies, okay? Again, I apologize, it's sloppy. I'm trying to write with the pen here. So most countries kind of hover somewhere in this region here, towards the middle, okay? US is going to be like this because we're going to be a heavily market economy where we have private ownership. You and I get to make most of the decisions in our economy, but then there's rules. So we have aspects of a command economy because there's rules, there's taxes we have to pay. The government's going to kind of dictate certain things. But the key to the market side is it's all about ownership. And that's what's very unique about the United States system compared to most systems around the world is most ownership is at the hands of the people, okay? And that goes back to the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution. That was half the reason they wrote that. It all had to do with property and how King George at that time, the British were taking their property, and that was kind of the final straw that led to the revolution. So other countries around the world are more heavily command, where the government's going to own aspects of the economy and private property, but the people still have some market values as far as having choices of what they're buying maybe, or where they live and stuff like that, jobs they get. And then you do have systems out there that are very heavily government. So the government, decides everything for you, okay? So think of that spectrum as I go through all the notes today and kind of say, okay, yeah, I get that idea. There's, the idea of no government versus full government, and we're kind of hovering in the middle somewhere. So like the US, like I said, is heavily market where you and I get a lot of private ownership of things. Like the way I always explain is you go to the store and buy something, they give you a receipt to show proof that you now own that property, all right? When you bought your cell phone, that's yours, unless you're making lease payments. So it's technically not yours until you pay it off, but it's yours, right? You own that piece of property, okay? So there's something to be said about that. A lot of places in the world, I know this is going to sound crazy, but a lot of places in the world don't have that, okay? You don't really own anything. Everything's given to you by the government, so you're kind of at the hands of the government of those societies. Okay. All right. So we always start with this thing called the traditional economy. Very basic. These do exist in many rural places of the world. Rural places of Africa, South America, Asia, even in the United States, we can still see the traditional economy of the Amish. Okay. And that picture down there in the bottom right, that's how they still produce. So answering that question of what you're producing and how you're producing, it's based on tradition. It's what your society has always produced, what your society has always, and how they've always produced it. All right, I was up in Wisconsin last week in between these summer school sessions, and we were just kind of cruising through the back, farmland country, whatever you want to call it. And one of the roads we were going down, there was horse manure all over the road. It was like bobbing and weaving with my car. And then right there on the one corner, you saw, a couple Amish houses, families. All right. No garage with a car in it. It was a horse and buggy. You could see their farm equipment looked like that, what that guy is using down there. No power equipment. A very, very unique style of living, but it still exists in the United States today. It's kind of interesting. All right. So just kind of looking at, the advantages and disadvantages. I'll let you guys kind of look at that, kind of freely, just to look at, what's the pros and cons of these types of economic systems. But really with traditional economies, they've always produced the way they've produced. So it's kind of unique in the way that they don't overproduce. That's one of the things I want you to walk away with. Okay. They produce for the unique group, for their community, of people within that small community. Where in our system, like the United States, we're going to mass produce cell phones because we want to sell them. Okay. They're not necessarily doing that. They're producing, in most traditional economies, they're producing to survive. So they don't want to overproduce, because then that's a lot of waste. Okay. All right. So command economies, looking at kind of the other end of that spectrum now. Command economies is when the government, or bureaucrats as we call them, are going to be answering the three questions for you and I. Okay. If we lived in one of these systems. All right, so there's two kind of unique types of systems. One's communism, one's socialism. We probably all heard those terms before. All right, communist system is where there's truly no private ownership. All right, so in a communist system, the government owns all industries. They own the factories, they own the businesses, the grocery stores. They own everything. They decide what you are not going to get. Socialism is kind of a middle area between a market economy, I would say, and communism. All right. So socialism is where the people still have some private ownership, probably of like maybe where you live, we'll say, or like some of the things you buy, your food, your clothing. But in many of the like stronger socialist countries, a lot of the major industries are still going to be owned by the government. All right. So they might own the car manufacturers, they might own the electric companies, the gas companies, and they produce based on what they think is necessary. Okay. Comparing that to like a market economy like the United States, the market's driven by you and I. That's why they call the market, based on wants and needs, based on what you and I are willing to buy. All right, that's what we talked about yesterday with those production possibility curves over the last 2 days, where we're going to produce more of one thing because people want it. But in order to do that, the people that are producing, and based on the people's wants and needs, we're going to move the resources to the production areas that are in most demand. Okay, all based on us as consumers and what we want. In a socialist or communist country, the government's going to play a larger role in deciding, no, we're going to produce this or we're going to produce that, not necessarily doing it based on what the people want, but what the government officials think is best. All right, so that's where you get a lot of the issues in those systems with either overproduction of things because they're producing things people don't want, or underproduction because they're deciding to produce and not produce the things that the people want and need. Okay, so, and this is I think I have some images on here. So there, you got some images of like the fact that in many of these socialist or communist systems, you might see grocery stores, kind of like they looked like with COVID, all right, going on after those first few weeks or months, right? Grocery store shelves empty not because there was a mass run on buying toilet paper and food products, but because the government's just not deciding to produce those particular items that people are in need of. All right, you might even see long lines just to get into a grocery store. Picture down there, I want to say was from Venezuela, maybe, trying to get into a grocery store. All right, just waiting in line for them to open. because you're hoping to get in there and get whatever's left on the shelves before that is also gone. All right, so one of the things that I would usually read to you guys is a story from Cuba about it. I have this older book from the 80s and 90s of these kids that wrote their stories of growing up in other countries, immigrating to the United States, and then becoming U.S. citizens. And it talks about their life in their old country versus now in the United States. And the one story I always use, because it's perfect fit for this, is the kid from Cuba. And he talked about how growing up in Cuba, they get these little coupon books. All right, they call them libretas or something like that. And the coupon book was like your money. Okay, so you guys have jobs, you love getting that paycheck because then you could cash it or deposit it in your savings or whatever you're doing with it. But that's the beauty of the market system in the U.S. is the incentive to go work is to get money, and then you get to decide how to use it. Okay, the story from Cuba was how when you worked, you're working a job that was given to you by the government. All right, so this particular kid's dad was like a sewer cleaner or something like that, and he was a smart guy and wanted to be like a doctor or a lawyer. But the government said we don't need any of those right now. So you're going to do this, and they gave him a job as a sewer cleaner. So that's another aspect of these economies that kind of doesn't work. You're doing jobs that you don't necessarily want. All right, so how hard are you going to work? Okay, so that tends to lead to some issues as well. So these booklets, going back to what I was first starting to talk about, is when you got paid, let's say at the end of the week or the month, whatever it is, you would just get a coupon book. That was like your paycheck. Then the story talks about how in that coupon book it would have little coupons for X amount, a pair of shorts, 2 shirts, 1 pair of shoes. I remember the story. It said you got 3 pairs of underwear for the entire year, 1 pair of shoes for the entire year. All right, so you're working a job the government gave you, and then you don't get a paycheck to decide how you're going to spend your money. You're given a coupon book, and that's how they ration the stuff that the government's deciding to produce in those type of economic systems. And this still exists today. All right, a lot of us are. Maybe some of you guys are sitting there like, holy cow, that'd be completely crazy. That's got to be so outdated. But it still exists around the world today where they do rationing to that extent. All right, so or you get it like a stamp book and they stamp what you got. So the story talked about how you had to go to one particular store on a particular day to turn in your coupon for your 3 pairs of underwear for the year or your 1 pair of shoes for the year. And he said in the story, if you miss that date, you're out of luck. You have to wait till next year's coupon book comes out. All right, and then they ration food the same way based on the size of your family. You get only so many coupons for food. You go to the store with your coupon book or your stamp book, and you basically just get what you can to fill, based on the rationing, what you're allowed to take out. Not what you want to buy, but what you're allowed to buy or exchange it. All right. Any questions on that? And again, guys, if you got questions, I know some of this is maybe eye-opening for a few if you didn't know that some of this existed, but all right, so market economies then is the other end of the spectrum. All right, so in these systems like the US, we're more market, but we're not a pure market economy, all right? So in a pure market economy, consumers and producers are gonna decide what to produce and how to produce it. And then in a pure market economy, those who get it is gonna be based on whether or not you can afford it or you can buy it or not, okay? So that's where the United States, we'll talk about this in the next, PowerPoint, where it's called American Mixed Market Economy. So we're heavily market in the fact that our consumers and producers decide what we're producing and how we're producing it, all right? But we're also command because our government's going to play a role and say, okay, what about the poor? What about the needy? What about the sick and the elderly? All right? If they can't buy those things, we can't let them go without. All right, so we're heavily market, but with those command aspects of also trying to protect the poor, the elderly, and the sick. Okay, we know it's not a perfect system. All right, but you got to kind of pick your battles. Like, what would you rather have? The mixed market system, where we're more heavily market, like we are, or would you rather go to the other end of the spectrum and convert more to a command system, where the government's really playing a larger role in what you can or can't buy? Okay. I'm going to guess most of us do enjoy going to the mall or going to a store or shopping on Amazon and kind of freely getting to pick what you want to buy. Okay. If we lived in a stronger command economy, you wouldn't be able to do that. All right. What they provide or what they sell on those sites would be, or at the stores would be rationed by the government. So your options would be far less. All right. So imagine like in that Cuba story, you go to one of those stores to get, turn in your coupon for a shirt. You probably have 2 options. Right, maybe a V-neck and a whatever the rounded neck is, and then they're both white or both gray or both blue or something like that. So you're going to have like one or two options of colors and design. If you go to a clothing store, because of a market economy, we have thousands of options of clothing and shoes and stuff like that, because you and I as consumers are just buying all those different things. Okay. You can kind of go through the advantages and disadvantages, because I'm going to kind of cover a lot of that in the next PowerPoint. So I'll just kind of keep moving through this. All right. So the two terms that a lot of students, I don't think they mix these up. I think usually we have a pretty good understanding of the idea of communism. But this is just two of the things I want you to see. The kind of the founding writers of these two concepts, communism versus capitalism. Karl Marx wrote the ideas of communism in his books, Communist Manifesto. Adam Smith wrote his ideas of capitalism, which is more the United States system, in his book, Wealth of Nations. Karl Marx wrote at a time when the Russian Revolution, or Russian industrial revolution, was taking place. And it was a time when the workers had no rights. We didn't have the unions like we have today, or minimum wages like we have today. So in Europe, you saw this system kind of being organized, where the workers were kind of at the discretion of the business owners. Okay. And if you didn't show up to work that day because you were sick, well, now you're screwed. Your job was filled by someone else. So in the U.S. system, that's where we do have some of those command aspects, where we're going to have rules in place to protect workers. Okay. It's not always perfect, but a lot better than the alternative. So Karl Marx kind of basically, he predicted that eventually the workers would take over the factories, and they would collectively own everything. Now, how he envisioned communism is not what it is today when we see and use the idea of communism around the world. All right. His idea of communism was this kind of kumbaya, let's all sit around the campfire and sing type of economy, where we all collectively produce and we all collectively share. And in true communism, the way he wrote it, there is no ownership. No one actually owns anything. All right. But the reason that doesn't work is eventually human nature kicks in. I mean, on paper, I'll admit it, on paper, it sounds like this great idea. We're all sitting out and relaxing, and we're all producing and eating and sharing, and we're living this happy life. But human nature kicks in, and you start wondering, okay, well, why am I getting the same amount of stuff as the person next to me when I'm doing twice as amount of work? As soon as that happens, that system fails. All right. And it just doesn't work. So over the years, his idea of communism has developed into, well, the government's going to collectively own everything and collectively share the wealth with the people. But again, once human nature kicks in and you have those government officials in charge, are they going to collectively share, or are they going to keep a larger amount for themselves? So the idea of communism that Karl Marx envisioned and how it's used today are kind of two different aspects. Okay. And then the idea of capitalism that M. Smith came up with, again, he was writing his ideas and developing it during the Revolutionary War era. And he just saw this idea that when the government or the king at the time and the government of Britain was controlling the economy of the colonies so much, it wasn't allowing the economy to grow. All right. And he saw that like it was like a beating heart, right? And it wanted to get out of there, and it was being confined, so it couldn't beat. So he realized that if we take away some of those government rules, all right, you got to be careful with that, because you still want it to be a safe economy and you want people to, not be taken advantage of. But he basically said, if we just allow the system to kind of work itself out, we're going to produce the things people want based on their wants and needs. Okay, so his famous quote here, it says, "It is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own interest." Okay, so this is kind of, I'll use the word selfishness. All right, it's kind of the idea when you talk about producers and the business owners. Okay, but that's why the system functions so well, is because he's basically saying here, it's not benevolence is like out of the kindness of their heart. All right, so the butcher, the person making the meat, brewing the beer, and baking the bread so people could eat back then and drink, they weren't making those things out of the kindness of their heart. They were making those things out of their own self-interest so they could eat, so they could make money. Okay. But at the end of the day, this idea of capitalism that he developed was, well, if we allow them to make what they want, they're only going to make the things that you and I are going to buy. All right. So if the consumers aren't going to buy it, no one's going to make it. Where in a command system, the government might still say, well, we are going to make it because the people need it, even if they don't know that the people don't want it anymore. All right, so Adam Smith really kind of focused on the idea. They called it, the free market, or he called it the invisible hand, which isn't like some religious thing or nothing. He's just saying, let it kind of develop itself, okay? Because if there's money to be made by making a product and people are going to buy it, producers are going to make it. And then as soon as that demand's gone, like we said with the silly bands in my Zoom the other day, once the demand for the silly bands are gone, those producers are going to move those resources to something else where the new demand is, where the new want or need is. And if we allow that invisible hand or that free market to kind of shift and flow on its own, it's going to be most efficient, and we're going to keep continuing to produce the things that are most in demand or most wanted and needed, and there'll be less waste. Okay, that's kind of the idea behind it. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and flip over to the other. Oh wait, there's one more thing here. Let me go down to. Sorry guys, kind of drawing a blank here. All right, so you got two terms here. I think they're pretty self-explanatory, but capitalist system is where the businesses and resources are privately owned. That means that the people own them, not the government. And then free enterprise system is the term that refers to you and I get to voluntarily buy what we want to buy. All right, so those are some parts of the American economic system that are key. Okay, that we privately own the resources and the businesses. Ford is owned by the Ford family. All right, Amazon is owned by Jeff Bezos and his group of investors. All right, so it's not the U.S. government that owns any of those things. All right, I don't know who owns Twitter today, but same concept. All right, the term, the concept tragedy of the commons is this concept that kind of came out of the capitalist system. And I know if you read that definition, it might be, the theory is maybe a little confusing, but it's basically this idea that if we privately own property, the property is going to be better taken care of than if we collectively own property. Okay, so this little visual here is basically saying, okay, let's pretend this is just one common land or a common area of land that farmers can let their cattle graze on. Well, if it's a common piece of land that we're all collectively sharing, human nature is going to say, well, I got to get mine before he can get his or she can get hers. All right, so I'm going to get all my cattle out on that land so they can eat before there's no grass, before all the grass is gone. All right, so if we do that, if I'm thinking that way, you're thinking that way, and everyone else, all the other farmers are thinking that way. So what happens then is the land just gets destroyed and it's gone and it can't be replenished. All right, and that would be for anything that we're collectively sharing. So now, out of that idea of capitalism was this idea, well, let's have privately owned farms. All right, so what does a farmer do? They put fencing around their farm and their property, and then they kind of quarter off their grazing areas, and they have their cattle eat in one location while the other areas grow. And then once that area is starting to die off, they move their cattle to a different area, and the area that they just ate can now grow back, and then they can eat the fresh stuff in another area. So it's this idea that was developed, this concept and theory that was developed, that if we collectively own stuff, a lot of times we mistreat it, we abuse it, we don't treat it efficiently. We could use that term. But if we privately own it, you're going to take care of it a lot better. Okay. The way I kind of think of it this way, this might make sense too. Like if you cash your check, let's say you have a job, you cash your paycheck. Okay. And you're going out on a Friday night. So you put $30 in your pocket or in your wallet for that night. Okay. To spend. And then you're heading out the door and mom or dad says, hey, here's $20. Go have a little fun tonight, whatever it is. All right. And so you put $20 from your parents in your pocket as well. All right. Which $20 are you going to spend first? All right. Think of that, $30 that you earn, that you work for, is like your private, ownership. And then the $20 that you just got from mom or dad is kind of like the shared, kind of, collectively owned cash. All right. So most likely if if I had you in class, you'd all raise your hand and say, oh, I'd spend mom and dad's money first and maybe hold on to mine a little longer if I can. All right. That's kind of, I think of cars too. Like when you put the money out of your earnings and you buy your own car, I see students, taking care of their cars. It could be a beater and they're washing it and they're taking care of it. They're kind of fixing it up a little bit here and there. All right. But if it's someone else's car that you're driving, that someone else owns, but you didn't put any money into it, you don't treat it as well. You might floor it a little more and run it a little harder. But when it's your car that you paid for, you might take care of it a little better. So kind of think of those concepts to connect to tragedy at the commons. Okay. All right, let's go to the other one. There we go. All right, so the U.S. is like I said, it's a mix of the two systems. All right, so in the U.S. we have that mixture of a command economy and a market economy. We're more heavily market because in the U.S. still today, all right, I know there's a lot of people protesting some of the ideas of a market economy, and I get some of the ideas that they don't like. If you have the Jeff Bezos and stuff of the world that have billions of dollars, I get it. Some people are going to say that's unfair, but at the end of the day, if the system wasn't designed to allow you to become a millionaire or a billionaire, would he have ever developed Amazon to what it is today? All right. So that's kind of the good and the bad of our system is there's that incentive. Hey, if I come up with the next Amazon or the next Google or the next, Apple, all right, I could be that billionaire. All right. Because that opportunity or that incentive is there. That's how you and I get the things like Amazon and Apple and Google and all the things that, the Nikes and stuff like that. So you got to kind of weigh the good and the bad of some of that sometimes. All right. So we are a heavily market economy with those command aspects of the government involvement, which I'll hit here as I go through this. Okay. So with the mixed market economy, I use this little cartoon this is kind of the ebb and flow struggle of it. All right. Like the bullet point says, it's the constant debate in the U.S. over how much government involvement is needed in our economy. Okay. And it's this pendulum that goes back and forth. All right. So the guy's freaking out, yelling, this is back from President Obama was president, saying, hey, Obama needs to do more. And then his shirt says less government, less regulation. So it's showing both views, right? The conservative and the liberal view of saying, the liberal view, oftentimes liberal, more Democrat view is going to say we need more government involvement in our economy, in our system. The Republican conservative view is going to say, no, we need less government involvement. All right. And as we kind of change our Congress and presidents over 4 8-year periods, we're constantly kind of swinging back and forth. There's years that we have more government involvement. There's years we have less. Okay. And it's kind of like at the end of the day, just kind of think of that pendulum just kind of hovering right over the middle. Okay. And that's this cartoon kind of sums it up, that constant debate that we're having. Because as soon as things are going bad in the economy, we say, government, where are you? Why aren't you doing this? Or why aren't you doing that? So then they jump in and start doing stuff. And then you and I are saying, what the heck? Our taxes are getting too high. Government, get out of my economy. Let me be. All right. So then someone else gets elected. They pull back on taxes and government regulations. And then something bad happens again. And now we're complaining that the government's not doing enough. So what's right or wrong? I don't know what the correct answer is. That's for you to decide on your own opinions. But it's constantly swinging back and forth. Okay. So some of the fundamental concepts of the American mixed market economy. All right, I'm just going to kind of go through these fairly brief, but make sure you kind of see why these are so important to the U.S. Okay, so number one is private property. Knowing that you and I get to own something is huge. Okay, and that when you bought it, you own it. All right, like I said, a lot of places around the world aren't like that. So these are the fundamental concepts to what drives our American economy. Okay, so such as when you buy a car, you get the title to that car. Or when you finally pay off that last car payment and then the bank sends you the title, it's like, yes, I finally own the car. It's truly mine. So there's something about this idea of private property, saving up to buy something or saving up to own a house or trying to pay off a house over the years of working. There's just something about that's kind of drives us to work hard or do more or whatever the case might be. Okay. I put Metallica and Napster on here. You maybe have no clue what Napster is. Maybe you've heard of the band Metallica, but in class we would go through these ideas of like, the Pandora and stuff today, and then how many of you guys, and now I'm starting to get to age groups that probably don't remember doing it as much or never did it, but used to download music for free off different sites. Okay, illegally, even though you were able to do it, right? So this was back when I was in high school. Napster was the site you could download music on. And Metallica sued them, and the government jumped in and said, yeah, that's not fair because Metallica's producing this music. They produced it. They own it. They have the rights to ownership of that music. And if people are downloading it for free, Metallica's private property of that song, they're not getting compensated for it. Right. So the government started kind of coming down on companies like these sites like Napster, and then I think one was LimeWire, and then whatever else came after that. And then that's where you develop the Pandoras and the iTunes and stuff, and those types of streaming services that now exist today came out of that. So, these are just areas where we have it, but we also it's guided somewhat by that command aspect of the economy as well. Okay. The next key concept is limited government involvement, which I kind of hit already. I'm not going to go into too much detail. All right, just allowing us to decide what to produce and how much we're going to spend on things. All right, if we're willing to go spend $1,000 on a phone, Apple's going to sell that phone for $1,000. All right, a lot of us will complain about prices sometimes, but I look at like Jordan shoes and what some of you guys, maybe not students here, but I've had students tell me what they've spent on Jordans, and it's like, holy cow. Well, they're going to keep selling them at that price if people are going to be willing to pay for them. All right, so that's on us. Us as consumers, we kind of develop what the prices of the goods and services are going to be based on what you and I are willing to pay. And Apple and these companies are going to figure that out. Okay, I put these two down here because there are times that, excuse me, the government does play some roles. All right, like gas prices. You and I are paying the price that the gas companies are going to be charging us based on the supply of gas. Okay, now those prices are fluctuating all the time. Farm products like milk or certain types of meat, those are sometimes going to be helped by the government, right? To what we call, and I'll talk about this a little later, are subsidies. All right, so if the government is, let's say farmers are producing something, the price you and I are willing to pay for those particular farm products at that time won't be enough for the farmer to survive and then plant next year's crop, the government jumps in to give a subsidy to pay that difference. All right, so this is the price that the farmer needs to get in order to survive. This is the price that we're willing to pay, all right, for those particular products. The farmers would never survive, all right, and then we'd be screwed because now all our farms would go bankrupt and shut down. So there are times that the government plays that role of buffering between the price that we want to pay and what the price the farmers need to get, all right, to try to keep them alive. Where are we at? Number 3, voluntary exchange. This is just so you and I have the freedom to buy and sell what we want. And then competition and consumer sovereignty is basically saying we want companies to compete. We don't want the government to come in and say, sorry, Apple or Samsung or Google, you can't sell that product no more. You're out. All right. We want competition because if 2 companies are competing for you and I to buy their product, the best thing they're going to do for us is, one, they're going to give us more options, all right? Because as soon as Apple comes out with something new, Samsung's going to do it to their phones, and they're just constantly battling each other for a better product. And then usually, maybe not with cell phones, but usually when you have competition, it also drives the price down, all right? So competition is going to give us better prices usually, but much better products and options, okay? If the government came in and said, hey, Apple's the only company that can sell cell phones, well, now we're screwed because if they're the only company that can sell them, they can charge their prices even more because they know we want cell phones and we have no other options. Right? As long as there's other options, it's going to still kind of buffer how far a company can go with the price. Okay. And then the last one here is specialization. So specialization is key in our system because it's, again, this free market allows you and I to kind of decide what we want to do in our careers and for jobs or what we want to do, okay? And a command system, a true command system, like some countries in the world, the government's going to decide what job you're getting. So now you're going to be working a job you don't even want to work. So you're going to work slower or slack on the job, and then you're going to become less efficient, and then production goes down, right? If we're using specialization and we're training people to do specific tasks to the point where those people get good at those tasks, now production is going to go up. We're going to be more efficient. Production goes up. Oftentimes prices could come down, and that's just good for the system as a whole. Okay, because you think about it, if I'm doing a job that I want, that I chose, hopefully I'm going to do my job better, and then you're going to get, as a consumer, you're going to get a better product. All right. Or if I'm doing a job that was given to me and forced on me, I'm going to be sitting back, just kind of slacking, and then you're not going to get a good product. All right. So that's one of the goals that specialization causes in the American system. Okay. All right. So those are the fundamental concepts. So the last thing I just want to quick go over here with you guys is the government's role in our economy now. All right, so the government's role is going to be this, we allow the free market to kind of flow and function, but there's going to be negative side effects that are happening. So that's where we see the government's role play in the US economy, where the government's got to kind of come in and say, okay, we're going to let you produce, but you have to produce it within these parameters, all right? All right, because we can't just let the free market completely go in any direction it wants, because then, you know, we'll have it back to the 1800s where factories are spewing pollution here and there, and workers are being mistreated. So we still have some parameters that the free market's got to work around, right? Whether it's rules and stuff like that, right? So I just put some examples on here, some visuals, whether it's, you know, the government trying to produce more clean energy, or having rules as far as how much pollution can be emitted from a factory. And then what happens is if companies are violating some of those rules, they can be shut down or they get fined, and there's incentives there for those companies to fix those problems, okay? Something like smoking, okay? This is a side effect in the economy where, you know, there's a market between cigarette producers and cigarette smokers. I guess I shouldn't put thumbs up, right? So you got cigarette smokers and producers. The market is buying and selling of cigarettes. Well, there's going to be tons of people that don't want to be associated with cigarettes or smell cigarettes, but they're going to, right? Because the market exists. Okay, so that's where the government role plays this role as far as saying, well, there's side effects in the economy that we have to try to eliminate. Okay, we're going to allow the market of cigarettes to exist, but we're not going to let you smoke in public places or in malls or in stores or wherever they've restaurants. Right, you guys are probably too young now. I don't even remember what the year was, but I remember growing up and there being, you know, smoking or non-smoking sections in restaurants. I mean, when I was a kid, you go to Joliet or Orland Square Mall, and people would be smoking in the mall. All right, they couldn't go in the store with a cigarette, but there would be ashtrays throughout the mall, or even on a plane. And up until like the 80s, I think you could smoke on a plane. So those are things that, you know, slowly the government kind of put more regulations on, but the market itself still exists. All right, the government doesn't own the cigarette manufacturers; those are still privately owned. All right, so it's kind of that role. That's, I think, the easiest example to show you how the government tries to play that regulator, I guess, but not ownership. Okay, and then things like this is just a map of showing you guys like other side effects. So in this area of Joliet, I don't know if you can. This is like Joliet Junior College, Cracker Barrel, I-80. I think this is the casino down here along the river. All right, so Humboldt Road, they're going to expand Humboldt Road across the river to tie into all the trucking that's come into this area over the last 10 years, okay? Because what it's causing is tons of truck traffic through Chicago Street, destroying roads, a lot of accidents, a lot of deaths along I-80 there. So the federal or the state and federal government are working together right now to say, okay, that's a negative side effect that's happened from the free market of, you know, all these businesses come into the area. It's the good and bad, right? Because it's created a lot of good paying jobs in the area of Joliet. However, now it's caused us kind of other side effects or negative externalities, as we call them. So the governments are trying to figure out, okay, if we build a bridge across, you know, expand Humboldt, we're going to make a direct access to the highway from all these trucking companies down here on the south side of the river. Okay, so just other examples of how the government kind of plays that regulator or buffer. Okay, so I've got kind of talked about those market failures. So that's what I was talking about, those negative side effects or externalities. All right, so just kind of quickly here, improving market performances. So these are just roles that the government, and if you got any questions about what some of these mean, or you can ask or send me a message. I don't want to read these to you all word for word, but just playing that role, just kind of keep thinking that word as like regulator, right? They're not the government's job is not to own stuff in our system, right? That's where you'd probably start seeing some pushback if the government starts trying to buy things up and take ownership of different, the production of certain things, but they're going to play a role in trying to help things being produced or reduce things being produced in different ways. And this is kind of how they do that, okay? So some examples I use in class are like recalls, right? If there's a product, one of the lines I usually try to, you know, I say to my students is the government's job in our economy is not to tell you what you can or can't buy, all right? They're not there to protect you from being a stupid consumer is what I say. If you want to go buy something that's useless, you're free to do that. That's kind of the beauty of the American system, all right? However, if that product is physically harming you, that is where the government takes that role and say, okay, these toys were painted with bad paint and kids are getting sick because they're chewing on them. There's a salmonella poisoning in peanut butter, or these cars had some defective part that's causing accidents and people are dying. All right, that is where the government will come in and try to force the hand of these manufacturers to do a manufacturer recall to fix the product. Okay, but not to keep you from being a stupid consumer. You can buy whatever you want. All right. Also, things like the FDA were developed to make sure our food products were developed a little cleaner. Okay. I'm not going to go into it in detail. I usually spend some time talking about the book The Jungle, the Upton Sinclair, and how disgusting the meatpacking industry was back in the 1800s. And that's where or early 1900s, sorry. That's where the FDA was developed out of. Okay. During the presidency of Teddy Roosevelt, he sent the feds in there and said, okay, we got to fix this. All right. We're eating food products that literally have human parts in it, and that's pretty disgusting. So that book kind of uncovered how bad our food production was at that time. Consumer Bill of Rights is just another example of the government trying to kind of regulate things by giving us warnings and stuff like that. All right, the last couple here, excuse me, guys. Providing public goods. So again, helping provide things that we need to have. Okay. Public goods are things like our schools, roads, traffic lights, libraries, stuff like that. Public safety, our police, and our fire protection. Right. So the question there is, what would happen if fire protection was a private good? So private goods are things you need to purchase in order to get. Okay. Public goods are provided to everybody, regardless if you paid for it. So when I pull up to the traffic light at Larkin and Jefferson, even if I don't pay Julia taxes, I still get to use that traffic light. And imagine if that traffic light wasn't there and Larkin and Jefferson were a four-way stop. That'd be ridiculous, right? So the government plays that role of providing public goods because it's impossible to provide those goods in a private market, okay? So if fire protection was a private good, the only way I get access to it is if I pay for it, all right? So I call up the local fire department and say, hey, my house is on fire, please send a fire truck. And then they look at their books, they pull up my name and say, oh, sorry, Mr. Port, you didn't pay your monthly fee. Good luck with your fire. All right. If it's a private good, they literally have the right to do that because I didn't pay for it, so I don't get anything out of it. All right. So there has to be that provision of certain things have to be provided as public goods. Otherwise, they just would not be provided on a private market. And then also promoting economic security and equity is when the government's going to provide things for the old, the sick, the elderly, the needy. So those who low income, right? Those who need that can't provide for themselves is basically what this role would be, right? So providing those things like I have here, and this is how much our government spend on these areas in the last years, right? Our last year budget, I think it was, or 2019 budget, I believe. So Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, so food stamps, housing assistance. So these are all things to provide for, again, the poor, the sick, the elderly, in areas that they can't provide for themselves. So again, we have the free market where you and I get to buy and sell what we want to within the parameters. There's always going to be those groups of people that are going to be kind of on the outside looking in. They don't get the job to be able to buy those necessary items. All right, so that's where that government role comes in, okay, and provides those things for them. Okay, and this is obviously a big topic of debate, especially election years. To what extent should the government play this role, and what extent should they kind of back off? Okay. And then the last one, which I already talked about, was those externalities, those side effects. Okay. So again, think of that, cigarette smoking, think of it like a glass. All right. And if the glass is the market, all right, so within that glass is where, the market for cigarettes is taking place. You got the producers and the buyers of cigarettes. If I keep filling up that glass with water, there's so many people in that market, it eventually overflows and people outside that glass are impacted by that market. Okay. So the government comes in and tries to promote positive side effects and deter negative side effects. So they deter negative ones like cigarette smoking by saying, hey, if you're letting people smoke in your restaurant, we're going to fine you. If you're polluting too much, we're going to fine you. All right, it's going to encourage those businesses to stop doing that because otherwise they have to pay fines. The positive side, all right, is when the government comes in and says, we're going to pay you to produce something. All right, so this happens a lot of times in the area of medicine, right? So, if there's thousands and hundreds of thousands of people that have diabetes, you're going to have the drug companies are going to make new prescriptions for people with diabetes because they can make millions of dollars off that because there's so many people that have it, right? However, if there's a disease or a sickness that very few people have, there's no incentive there for a company to make a prescription for those people because there's not enough people there to make a profit off of. They're going to spend more money in research and developing the medicine that they'll ever make back in profits from selling the medicine. Which it's not that they don't care about those people. It's the fact that there's just no incentive there to do it because it's a business, right? And if you're not going to make a profit, you're not going to produce it, all right? So that's where the government will come in and say, hey, we need to help the people over here. So we're going to give you a subsidy. In other words, we're going to pay you to develop that medicine. We're going to pay you to do the research, develop it, and then once you develop it, now you get to sell it and keep the profits. All right, so now there's that incentive to actually do it. Okay, that is it. I know I kind of went a little longer than I wanted to, but I am recording this, guys, so I will post it on Google Classroom later today. So if you have to go back and rewatch it, if there's something I was explaining that I went a little fast, feel free to do that. Otherwise, if you have any questions, anything, please let me know. But just kind of sum it up, guys. Remember that U.S. is still a heavily free market system, all right? And we have that command aspect of more of the regulatory side of it, all right? You and I, the keys are that you and I get to kind of make a lot of the decisions for ourselves, the private property piece, and then the government kind of regulates the parameters of how far we can go with what we buy and sell and how we produce it, okay? Other than that, if you have any questions, stick around. I'll leave the Zoom going. Otherwise, you're free to go. Enjoy your weekend. Don't forget to get that stuff in